Hey, today we're going to look at a report compiled by Thomas Malone, who's one of the economists at CoreLogic. The report looks at the total return from real property. As you're aware, there are two things that you can do when you own real property. One is you can live in it. The other one is you can buy it and then rent it out. When you look at two periods of time, if you just buy it at one period of time and sell it, that's a rate that can be measured. If you buy it at one period of time and then you rent it over that time, you can measure the change in rent over that period. So his methodology here is he's going to look at 5-year returns, and his total return is defined as the following. One is the 5-year return on price. So if you bought your house 5 years ago and you just resold it, that's a number. If you bought your house 5 years ago and you rented it for 5 years, what was the change in rent over that? That was a number. I want to illustrate this graph that he has compiled. The blue line is the total return, which is the sum of the green and the orange line. The orange line is rent return and the green line is price return. And if you can see, this is not really shocking to anybody that the total return over the past 2 years has been on a straight upward trend, as has the price return on that. Shockingly, though, the rent return has not been as high as he has measured as we've kind of heard of in the press. The total return and the price return certainly track each other. I do want to point out that house prices and rents do go down. If you look at the bottom here, this period between 2005 and 2010, which really encompassed the recession, house prices did go down. So those of us who have just kind of focused on the last 2 years and seen that house prices have done nothing but go straight up, house prices can come down. We hope that doesn't happen again, but this graph is very illustrative in terms of what's going on. I want to point out two tables that he has done. So he has taken the top 10 metros, which are metropolitan statistical areas, as defined by the census in the United States, and he has grouped them by top 10 for total return and then the bottom 10 for total return. This is the end of 2021, so this data is about 7 to 8 months old. So he ranks them based on total return. So we talked about this, the price return, and then the rent return gives you the total return, and then Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona leads the list at almost 120%. Clearwater, Florida is just behind in second place at 119%, and then Detroit pops in at 115. Now, there's a couple commonalities that this table has. One is geography, and one is house prices. So if you look at Scottsdale, you look at Clearwater, you look at Delray Beach, Florida, Las Vegas, Jacksonville, Florida, Arlington, Texas, Tucson, Arizona, all those are warm weather climates with net inbound population. Detroit is not a warm weather climate, nor is Rochester, New York. But what they share, as they share with the other ones in these other metropolitan areas, is they share a lower priced housing stock compared to what the median or average is in the United States. So for the most part, these areas have inbound population and lower cost housing, and so that's driving a higher return. If you go down to the bottom, we'll go over this, they share outbound population, and for the most part, colder climates. So White Plains, New York, San Francisco, Norwalk, Connecticut, DC, Towson, Maryland, Boston, Mass, San Francisco, Long Island. I wouldn't call San Francisco, I wouldn't call Honolulu a cold weather climate, but the number one commonality that these areas have, with probably the exception of New Orleans, is they are at the top in terms of average sales price based upon metropolitan statistical areas, where these are not necessarily on the bottom, but they are at average or a little bit below. So the commonalities in terms of driving your return, in terms of total return, is a net inbound population, and for the most part, warm weather climate. Down below, you have a net outbound population, and you have a very high house price stock for which buyers get to pick from. So I hope this table gives you an illustration of what happens when you have outbound population and high housing stock. Your return is lower than when you have inbound population and lower priced housing stock.